Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, and this is Doublebits Workshop. Alright, thank you all for joining me today. In today's project I will be making a little kind of drink holder, if you will. I have some more live edge left over out in the yard, and I've been looking at a couple different projects, and we have a wedding coming up for a friend of ours, or friends, they're both our friends, very good friends indeed, and they were wanting after their wedding to have a venue to stop by and kind of have an after party. So we plan on having a few people stop by from the wedding, but not the entire wedding party. That'd be fine as well. That being said, we're going to have a little bit more of a ability to drink, an ability to relax, have some different games and stuff going on, and it should be a good time. So there's a couple projects that are going to be coming up for that, but one of the things that I wanted to create was a little tray, kind of like you would have for either cheese and other stuff. This would be for the drink side of things. So we will be having an open bar there as well, and I wanted to create a little platform or platter, so if people wanted to have some different kind of shots that are themed in the wedding and such, they could be presented this on a cool little board that has some cutouts for the actual shot glasses. So without further ado, let's get on to the video and see what we're able to come up with. Alright, so I went out into the woodpile and kind of looked around a bit, and I found this log in particular. So my main prerequisites is I would like to try this out on the bandsaw if possible. Otherwise I do have my chainsaw, and if that doesn't work I can also attempt to use my circular saw to make a few cuts, or I can use my chop saw. Downfall of both is that they're only going to be 10 inches for the blade, which isn't going to be enough to cut this item, since it's usually about half or a little less on most of those, just because of the center is where it's spinning from. So the actual 10 inches of the blade, you're only using half of it. And this is going to be pretty decent size for what I'm working with. So I think this might just fit in my bandsaw, but I don't know how the blade's going to cut. So we're going to try that out. I do have a good amount of it, so I will make a few cuts, a couple different methods if need be, but all I'm trying to accomplish here is to get just a thicker couple inches to like 1.5 inches to a couple inch cut. And then that'll give me enough meat and potatoes to actually cut into with a Forstner bit, so that way I can have spots to have the cups kind of arranged in there. And what I'm going to really want with that is the capability to cut in with a Forstner bit, but I also want a little bit for sanding and such. So I don't want to cut these so thin that I have to kind of make the cuts with the Forstner bit and then have a really thin, just kind of like ready to break apart piece of material. I actually want something stable as well, has a little heft to it. So that way when I set it down, the glasses won't tip over or be easily kind of knocked around and such. So we shall see real quick, making those cuts, how this turns out. Well, I would say that was a bit tedious, and at the end I had to opt for the handsaw. Reason being is the chop saw is an alright method, and it was kind of a last resort. I think honestly I probably should stick with the chainsaw method. You don't get quite as kind of like parallel lines with your cuts, but it's a bit more safe because I can clamp, or I can hold, or I can drill a hole and drive a stake through a long, chunk of wood essentially, and then just use the chainsaw through it or have it resting. There's a couple of different easy methods essentially. Using the chop saw, there's no real good way on the live edge not being like super flat on one side. This has a little bit of flatness, but it kind of kicks up, so it just made it want to roll a bit on me. The bandsaw, I was hopeful, but the actual height of it wasn't quite big enough to encompass this, just because of that last little ridge on the actual wood. Sadly, it was just a little too big for it, and I could have probably sanded it and tried a little bit more, but I opted for the chop saw method to just kind of knock it out. So I'm left with a couple of little like ridges here from having to do multiple cuts, and then one cut being slightly off because of it being live edge. So I'm going to sand that off now, and try to create a flat plane on top and bottom and kind of see which side ends up looking the best. I do have my hand planer, that Ryobi one that I picked up a while back, so I might play around with a couple of those, put in some earbuds for some just ear protection, some safety glasses for sawdust, and I'm going to turn my dust collector on to act as my dust collector, as you may have seen me kind of doing. It's working really good. This small of a kind of cubic feet of air displacement, that guy does a great job of just kind of creating kind of a wind tunnel in here, which is really nice and helps out great. So yeah, we will go on to that next step, and then I will let you know the next bit that I have in mind. So pretty much just to kind of recap, all we've done so far is just cut a log down, trying to create 2 flat sides, rough 1.5 inches or so for thickness of it, so that way we have some meat and potatoes to kind of drill press into. Alternatively, you can use some hole saws with a drill. Otherwise, you can still use the same Forstner bit with the drill if you don't have an actual drill press. And what you can do is just kind of smooth them out or sand the edges of them if your holes end up kind of going off angle with them. But right now I'm trying to sand both sides to make a nice flat surface, so that way when I do go to the drill press, it's not going to be kind of cattywampus and end up causing any of the shot glasses to be angled in an odd way that isn't more stable once filled with fluid. So, on to the next step. Alright, so let me catch you up real quick on what I have done. So I kind of skipped there a little bit. I got into the middle of my head and my process and forgot to kind of catch you guys up. So, not that you couldn't have necessarily seen, but just so you know, what I did is out of my drill bit set, I utilized the 1-inch drill bit out of my Ryobi 8-piece. Just a basic wood Forstner bit. Like I said earlier, you can use a hole saw, or a couple different varieties, and I drilled 4 holes, just a little bit apart, a little bit from the edge of whatever working with the live edge part. This is definitely one of those projects that any of my dimensions kind of are null and void, due in part to the fact that being that this is a live edge piece, and anyone that is out there could potentially at a random lottery get the same size piece, but otherwise just kind of a rough parameter. I went about 1/4 of an inch from the seam, or from the side of the log, due in part to that this is the same Russian olive that I was using before, so you have really light rings and really dark rings. So for my kind of proximity on it, is I gave myself about 1 dark ring and then the 2 light rings on the outside, and that approximated out to about 1/4 inch all the way around for where I drilled my holes. In between them, same principle. I went off of 1/4 inch between the glasses as well, knowing that these kind of fluted out at the top. And then that way they are pretty much right up next to each other. I figured that way it'd give them less ability with the thumb hold that I have here. So if you were to be holding this and walking it to some place, it would give less chance of those to have the wobbling capability, being as that they are all kind of borrowing each other's shoulder to rest on. And then I just kind of had a general size to work with for the decanter on the side. This is just kind of a generic whiskey decanter. Anything can go in here, of course, and that doesn't necessarily matter. But besides that, let me set these aside. What you can kind of see on here is that you have the thumb hold, and then you have a placement for the decanter, as well as the additional 4 spots for 4 shot glasses. And these are actually not shot glasses, these are the dessert cups from Dollar Tree that are basically shot glasses. They actually equate to the same as 1 shot, so they're perfect for it. And for my 1 inch, the bottom of them, since they flew to the top, fit perfectly, just enough to not be too snug, so that way they all mount in there nicely. And then I have that thumb hold, and all I did for that was I did the 1 inch about the same as I did these sides, and then I just kind of shadowed next to it, and then as you saw in the time lapse, I chiseled out the corners and then sanded it all smooth. And I kind of went around a little bit with some sandpaper in hand and just kind of hand sanded each one of the actual little circles, so that way it gave a little bit more of the detail or articulation, and I just used my finger to kind of press in the sides, so that way I know it's making contact and getting just a light buffing and pulling off some of that tooth that comes with the Forstner bits. This turned out pretty good. This is actually going to be a precursor to my next build that will be for next week. I will be completing it here in the next couple days, start to finish, and I will be filming it. What it is going to be for is that this is going to sit on top of a bar. So I'm going to be constructing a bar that will temporarily stay at my house and then eventually go into a friend of mine's house as a housewarming gift. That's at least the plan. Some changes might happen between now and then for that, but otherwise the ultimate plan is going to be to build that and have that stage in our kitchen for after our friend's wedding coming up this coming week. So stay tuned, I'll be building that next, and this will be sitting on top of it. So if you enjoyed what you watched, be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out greatly, and it gives you the ability to know exactly what I'm up to next. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified each and every time I upload videos. Helps me out and helps give you the ability to know exactly when each one of those uploads happen. So thank you all so very much for watching, and have yourself a wonderful evening.